All right, good evening. I'm Ellison Barber. That was Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro there. You were just listening to a press conference from Blair County, Pennsylvania, where 26-year-old Luigi Mangione was arraigned on felony weapons charges. He is the person of interest in the deadly shooting of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, and he was taken into custody in Pennsylvania this morning. We have just learned Mangione has been charged with 2 felonies and 3 misdemeanors. Those are tied to the gun and ID that was allegedly discovered on him when police were called to a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Again, that was earlier this morning. Take a look at some new video that we're just getting in as well. This video here is showing the 26-year-old in handcuffs as he is walked towards the building ahead of his arraignment on those weapon charges. So far, we're told he has been denied bail, but he did not enter a plea. Let's bring in NBC News' Stephanie Gosk, who is in Altoona, Pennsylvania tonight for us. Stephanie, walk us through what stood out to you from that press conference. What did we learn from officials there that was new?
Sure, Ellison, most notably was the fact that the arresting officer was just 6 months on the job of police officer when he was called to this McDonald's this morning around 9 a.m. or so. There was an employee here that recognized Mangione. Those pictures have been circulating, thought he looked suspicious and called police here. The officer and his partner arriving on the scene, what he described in that press conference, is coming in, starting to talk to Luigi Mangione, asking him to pull down a medical mask that he was wearing. He says he and his partner immediately knew that that's who they were looking at. And they asked him if he had been in New York City recently. And when they asked him that question, he became nervous and started to shake. He also, we are told from law enforcement, showed a fake New Jersey ID. And that fake New Jersey ID was the same one that was shown by the person of interest at the hostel in New York City when he checked in. It was among a number of things that they found on him, a number of fake IDs, a laptop that he was working on. He also had clothes that were similar to the shooter's clothes, and most importantly, perhaps, a gun and what they were calling a suppressor that looked like the weapon used in the shooting 5 days ago in Midtown Manhattan. All of this being pulled together, but it's important to make the point that he has not been charged yet with the murder of Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. He's being held on those weapons charges, as well as lying to police about his identity, Ellison.
Yeah, that's right. So again, for viewers at home, he is currently charged in Pennsylvania with 2 felonies, 3 misdemeanors. Those 2 felonies are forgery in the 2nd degree, presumably related to a false identification, as well as a firearms count carrying without a license in the 3rd degree. In terms of those misdemeanors, they are tampering with government records or identification, possessions of an instrument, meaning a weapon, as well as a false ID. We are told from our team inside of that courtroom there was no plea. He was only asked if he understood the charges, and he said he did. Stephanie, one thing that also stood out to me in that press conference was hearing police there talk about what happens next, an extradition to New York, and the possibility of Luigi Mangione deciding to waive his extradition rights. Walk us through what could happen here next. New York police, they are in Altoona trying to question him, right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, while we were standing here, we saw a motorcade go zooming by. That was the NYPD with lights flashing. They are here. They're going to question him. They're going to, if they're going to charge him, they may do that soon. But there has to be a process that has to be held. You know, as you mentioned, he is charged with a number of crimes here in Pennsylvania. So there will be an extradition process. There is also a hearing that he is scheduled to have December 23rd. So Luigi Mangione is not leaving Pennsylvania anytime soon, and they certainly aren't going to let him out of jail, that's for sure.
And Stephanie, in terms of how he ended up in Altoona, walk us through what police say they think he did in the days after, allegedly, if he is in fact the person New York has been looking for, the New York Police Department, what he did during his time in Pennsylvania and where they think he may have gone.
Well, Ellison, we knew from law enforcement officials that the day of the murder of CEO Brian Thompson, that the person of interest went to a bus station in northern Manhattan. And then they lost the trail, according to what they said publicly. So they believed, or it certainly would lead someone to believe, that he took a bus from that bus station over the GW Bridge, which leads to New Jersey and eventually to Pennsylvania. The governor in this press conference saying he went to Philadelphia, that he then went to Pittsburgh, and then that he came to Altoona. They didn't give any details, and what a lot of people were asking in that press conference about where he might have stayed and where he may have gone over that period of time. I mean, you're talking about 5 full days. And one of the most remarkable things about this case was that it took as long as it did to find him. The police in New York City saying they did not have an identity. But what they did say today is that those photos that were released, and they released quite a few, but particularly the ones of him in the hostel where you could see his face, that those were critical to making an arrest in this case. That is what the employee here at this McDonald's recognized, and that is why the employee called 911, got the police to come here, and eventually that's why we're here now with this arrest being made, Allison.
All right, Stephanie Gosk in Altoona, Pennsylvania, on that breaking news. Thank you. We appreciate it. We're going to stay on this story because the person of interest in the murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, here in New York, his online posts and social media feeds, they are all now seeming to play key roles in the investigation as it unfolds. So here to help us break this down and the latest developments in this case is NBC's Tom Winter. Tom, I want to kind of pick up where Stephanie left off because you've been so careful, rightly so, in your reporting. And as far as the NYPD and the FBI's investigation goes, this individual, Luigi Mangione, is still considered not a suspect, but a strong person of interest in the murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. Is that where things still stand in New York right now?
In New York, it does. But in Pennsylvania, Allison, and good evening, what they're looking at now is an argument they made to the judge as far as making sure this individual was not put out on bail, which is effectively saying we expect him to be charged in New York, potentially with a homicide. And so that's where the state of play is in the courthouse. It appears clear to us, at least initially, that they're going to probably charge him based on everything you just heard. But it might take a couple of days, and it can take a couple of days legally, because you know what? His face might match that face. It might match all the other faces that we've been looking at. He might have had the same identification that he had at the hostel on his person today, and the same thing with the weapon. But they have to prove all those things. They have to go back and build this thing together now that they have him as far as all the elements, and make the argument to the judges in Pennsylvania, hey, we want him out of here. And then they've got to make the argument, ultimately to a judge and a jury potentially in New York City if they charge him. So there's some work that needs to be done. This doesn't need to be a perfect case. Okay, so you don't need to sit there and sift through all the evidence and make sure that everything is perfect, like you're ready to go to trial. They'll be able to do a lot, I think, in a short period of time to be able to show that they have enough reason to get him out of New York.
You know, I was struck, Tom, by Pennsylvania authorities saying that he was initially cooperative in interviews with police, but he is not now. We mentioned social media. This is a young person. He appeared to have a very robust presence online. We have also heard from authorities there in Pennsylvania that they allegedly discovered some sort of writings, a so-called manifesto, when they took him into custody. What do people need to know? What do we know right now about the interest in his online presence and the possibilities of that so-called manifesto that he had with him?
About as high as it gets, Ellison, in plain terms. So they're definitely combing over all those posts. There's been some other items on social media related platforms that they are looking at. I think that's significant. And so there's some things that will come out, I think, in the next couple hours as we do our reporting and they do their investigation. Actually flip that around, that we'll be able to talk to you about. But certainly here a little bit more than meets the eye. Ultimately, though, let's take a step back and look at what the governor said. The governor said, look, shooting somebody using violence, if in fact he's charged with that here, for your personal benefit or for the benefit that you think society might have, that's not acceptable. And that's what the governor said. So I think, you know, we can and we probably will go nuts about all the various accounts that we look at over the next couple of days. But the facts are the facts. If in fact he's charged with homicide, that's not necessarily relevant, Ellison.
And in terms of what happens in the next couple of days, you mentioned that extradition process. It can take a while. The police there saying he has the option, if he chooses, in the next 24 hours or so, to waive his extradition rights to New York, assuming New York does charge him in the coming hours. But if he chooses not to waive that right, it could take days. What, in your past experience covering this sort of thing, how long does it typically take to see someone removed from a nearby state like Pennsylvania to get them back here in New York to answer on other charges?
You know, we had a great example in Brian Koberger. The individual's been charged and accused in the University of Utah shootings. Typically, most attorneys say, you know what, let's just get him to the place where he's going to face charges. No reason to duke it out here, because you run the risk, Ellison, particularly in a state where we get the court documents that we get in Pennsylvania, that prosecutors and law enforcement get to put a lot more stuff on the public docket, enough things for me to read, to share with you, and to share to everyone about this individual's background. And so that's just typically, not speaking to this person, but typically a big reason why attorneys say, you know what, let's get them back to face charges in the district where they're charged, and then we'll get everybody to go quiet. So I think that's why that's probably more likely than not here, but you never know.
All right, Justice Correspondent Tom Winter, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and insights on this. For more on the profile of this person of interest and where the investigation may go from here, let's welcome back John Moynihan. He is a retired NYPD captain. He's also the author of a series of detective novels. His latest is The Guns of Antwerp, NYPD Takes Boston. John, thank you for joining us, and I appreciate you jumping in on such a chaotic moment of a lot of information coming to us. If I can you take us back? Let's go back to New York. And this, again, is an individual who police in New York are calling a strong person of interest, not a suspect in the murder here, though based on what we heard in that press conference, it seems that homicide charges are likely coming his way from the state of New York. Given that, let's look at a map and sort of go back to the route we believe Mangione possibly took here. So he was found in Altoona, Pennsylvania. That is over 250 miles west of New York City. We know it appears, based on what we've heard from authorities, that he traveled by bus for at least part of that journey. But then we just heard in that press conference from Pennsylvania authorities that they say they believe there was some sort of traveling that took place between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And they're asking people in Pennsylvania to come forward with any sort of information they may have. When you look at that track and the course of time we've been dealing with, what do you take away from it? Do you get the sense that this was someone who possibly had a plan for the first 24, maybe 30 hours after this alleged crime occurred, and then sort of was just seeing where he could go? Or does it seem like this was someone that has had the last 5+ days calculated, if in fact this is the suspect in the New York case?
It's well put, because he calculated things to an extent, but not to a great extent. I mean, he was in New York for 10 days prior. What was he doing? Now, this, you know, he left the George Washington Bridge bus terminal. I said this the other day. There's 3 places right now. He's a Greyhound customer by habit. We know this coming up from Atlanta. Greyhound goes to 3 cities out of that bus terminal: Philly, Boston, D.C. So he went to Philly. That's what it looks like. And then from Philly, somehow found his way to Pittsburgh. And then why he came back towards the city east to Altoona. Pittsburgh is further west than Altoona. You know, it's hard to. Hopefully, we'll know the truth soon. And this drives me to my next point. You really touched on it just a moment ago. We'll find out, depending on how good. See, this is where the real detective work begins. Now that we found him, you said that initially, early this afternoon, they hadn't charged him yet. Not even Pennsylvania. Right. It took him a while, right? And that chief got on and told us that initially he was cooperating, and then he wasn't, and then we charged him. This is exactly how this works. Once he's charged, you have filed an accusatory instrument with the court, absolute right to counsel attaches, you can no longer interrogate. Our guys, the reason we're not charging him, we want to get him in a box. We want to talk to him. If he said, right now, for our New York detectives, for our New York case, he has a qualified right to counsel. In other words, we read him Miranda, he waives, we can talk. He can talk, we can have a conversation. Once he says lawyer, it's all over. But once we file a charge, the right to counsel becomes absolute by law. Once you file the accusatory instrument, you can no longer question. That's why it's going to take a while. If he continues to cooperate and we get a good detective in a box with him, we're not going to charge him until we can see how much we can get him to talk. Once he lawyers up, charge him. That's what's going to happen.
Okay, so as someone who is not a police officer, is not a detective. We're looking at this from the outside and thinking, okay, it looks like they have a lot of evidence in New York. Why haven't they charged him here yet? But you think that could be a strategy on the NYPD's part?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes. It's like when we have established probable cause on any case, detective brings it to the boss, says, I think I have probable cause on this guy. Sure, go get him. We don't go get an arrest warrant because that is, in fact, an accusatory instrument, and you have just attached absolute right to counsel. You can't question that guy when you find him. We go, we make the arrest, read Miranda. If he waives, we can talk to him. If he doesn't waive, now we charge him.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on the weapon that, according to police, was found in Luigi Mangione's possession. We have an image of this. This is the firearm. From the outside, it appears to be a fairly standard semi-automatic pistol. But what authorities are saying is, in addition to recovering some sort of silencer in Pennsylvania, they are also suggesting that this possibly could have been made entirely from a 3D printer, a so-called ghost gun. When you look at that, and then also when we go back to the video that I know you have looked at and analyzed on the show throughout this case so far, of this moment where the shooting takes place, and it appeared at some point, a lot of people have talked about this, that weapon jammed and that he seemed to know what to do with it. When you look back on that now with the possibility that this could be a ghost gun, a 3D printed gun, do you think, does that change your opinion of that? Because I heard so many people saying, OK, he knew what to do when it jammed. He must be really trained. But do 3D printed guns, are they just more prone to jamming? Well,
first off, that's not a 3D created gun.
You don't think that is?
No, that's a properly manufactured weapon. I don't even, to tell you the truth, when I'm looking at it in the picture we got on the screen right now,
I think we can go back to it.
That doesn't look like the weapon that they recovered. And I'd like to know how much ammunition did he have in his backpack. He had a backpack on him. That does not look like a 3D created gun, and it could be. I'm no ballistics expert, but that does not. That looks like a properly manufactured gun, and it doesn't look like the murder weapon either. This kid was heading back towards New York. Realize Pennsylvania is well west of Altoona. He's heading back towards New York. How much ammunition did he have? What else was on his mind? He took 10 days in New York before he shot that man. Now he's on the road for 5 days and he's circling back towards New York. I'm not sure that that's the murder weapon that was seen in that picture. It really doesn't resemble the one that I saw. The one that I saw has to specifically be racked after each shot. That's a semi-automatic weapon that you should be able to fire after you rack it once. I mean, there's a lot more that we'll find out once they get him charged. And let's hope they don't charge him soon. We want our detectives to be able to talk to this guy.
So with the NYPD that is in Altoona, Pennsylvania right now, how do you think they are approaching interactions with him?
We're not talking to him yet.
Okay.
No, that's theirs. That's theirs.
So and until he's extradited, they can't really do.
They don't want to.
Conversation.
They took their shot. Tried to talk to him. They succeeded for a little while, it sounds like, and then he lawyered up, and then they charged him. That's exactly the sequence of events on how it's supposed to happen. While we're talking about Altoona, can I just give a great shout out to that kid? Even you, Stephanie Goss, you can't mention the fact that he's 6 months out of the academy without smiling. That's just such a great thing. Truly, what happened in Altoona, let's understand just how great it was based on what did not happen. That kid walked up to that table and said, "You've been to New York lately?" His presence, his posture, his entire approach, what did not happen is this man did not commit suicide. Okay, someone in his position may be prone to shoot themselves. We'd never have any answers. He didn't draw and try to fight it out with the cops. He didn't try to run. And think of this. McDonald's is a fast food restaurant, right? By the time he got his food, sat down, started to eat, one person saw him, went to the clerk, clerk calls up, 5 minutes have gone by already. How long does it take to eat your breakfast at McDonald's? That the cop responded immediately. He didn't blow it off and say, oh, another sighting. He went there as quickly as he got there really fast. It wasn't like he walked in and had two people saying, we thought we saw the shooter here. No, he got there quickly at a fast food restaurant. Like, there's so many things that did not happen in Altoona.